Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this session today, which is the Citizens of Change panel discussion focusing on journeys into volunteering and activism. So I'm going to be chairing this along with my colleague Pascal, who also works in the University of Leicester Sanctuary Seekers Unit. So this is the final event of the University of Leicester's Breaking Barriers Refugee Week. The other sessions this week are focused on different projects which are part of our sanctuary work. All of these projects owe much of their success to the involvement and dedication of volunteers and activists, change makers who apply themselves to making a positive difference. We wanted to put on this session today to really focus on and celebrate the work that volunteers and activists do in the sanctuary field, and perhaps to inspire more people to get involved. To that end, we've invited along 4 panellists who've been working with us in our sanctuary projects, either as individuals or through our partner organisations. We'd like to warmly welcome them here today, and I'll just introduce them briefly now and they'll give you a quick wave. So we have Mariam Taha and Moses Seitler, Anna Jones, and Zishan Arif. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming along and being panellists here today. So before we get started, I'm going to hand you over to Pascal to go through the housekeeping.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for the introduction, Alex. So just a few housekeeping rules. You won't be able to unmute yourselves. That the reason for this is we don't want you to appear in the video recording without your consent. So please use the chat box if you have any questions, comments, or if you have any issues or concerns. You can also send a private message to Alex. Obviously, be kind, respectful. As I mentioned, we are recording this session, but you will not appear as only active speakers will appear on Zoom. And we will send you a link to the video recording once it's been uploaded onto our YouTube channel. And if you have any queries after the session, you can email the Sanctuary Seekers Unit on sanctuary@le.ac.uk. And now I'm just going to have a little bit of an overview of the session today. So in the first section, our panelists will share their journeys briefly with us. Then we will have a panel discussions where I will ask questions to our panelists. Then if you have put some questions in the chat box, we will ask some of the most relevant ones or popular ones to our panelists. Then Alex will do a brief roundup of the session, and we will also mention some volunteering opportunities. Okay, and without further ado, we will leave our panelists to introduce themselves a little bit more, and we will start with Mariam.
Hi everyone, it's really nice to be here with you today, and I'm just going to briefly introduce myself and speak to you today about my journey into volunteering and activism. So my name is Mariam. I work at City of Sanctuary UK, and my role is Universities of Sanctuary and Regional Coordination. So really briefly, just wanted to today speak to you about how this started, why I got into volunteering, or how I kind of developed this passion for my role and the work that I'm doing now. So as you can see from kind of the different images or the icons, they kind of represent different stages of my journey into volunteering. The first one, you can see the plane is arrival. So I arrived in the UK as an asylum seeker, and I arrived at age 14. So as soon as I arrived, the immediate kind of next step was to join school and to learn English and adjust to a new education system. I was very focused on kind of learning and kind of my academic studies and how to progress through the different stages of school and college, whilst at the same time, I would say going through lots of adjustments and kind of ways to learn about the new system that I'm in educationally, culturally, language. So there was lots to navigate and lots to kind of understand, and it was quite overwhelming. Part of that was, or I guess the result of that was that I didn't have a really good social network or kind of support network at the time. And I didn't know what I was passionate about. I was just kind of focused on school at the time. So between when I finished school, I was in school for 2 years. So when I finished my high school, before I went to college, there was the summer holiday. Lots of friends and people with me went traveling or went to apply for jobs or do different things. And I felt that there was lots of free time and I didn't know what I could do to help or maybe use my time productively and wisely. So I went and researched. And so you can see from that kind of picture of a really kind of surprised girl, that's me finding out that there are volunteering opportunities in my community. I went on a website called doit.org and I found out that it finds volunteering places for you based on your postcode. And so I put my postcode in and I found a community outreach organization that's focused on healthcare, raising awareness about different health conditions, NHS health checks. And I really wanted to go into the healthcare sector and study the sciences and healthcare in the future. So I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to kind of learn a bit more. And it all started from there, really. My goal was to meet new people and to learn more about how I can help in the community. But I got out so much more from kind of what I expected to the end result after I finished volunteering with them. I started with a group of young people. So you can see the picture there is me and some of the young people we were working with. It was a youth project and it was called Salford Healthy Communities Collaborative. And we'd go into the local community and raise awareness of health conditions. And I realized and understood lots of the barriers and issues that my community was facing in terms of understanding health conditions and how to access health checks, etc. So there was lots that I learned about the local area that I was living in. And I was there for maybe 3 years, but I didn't know much. And when I came to the UK at that time, there wasn't a big community of people seeking asylum or refugees. And so this really helped me feel like I belonged to the community. It gave me a sense of belonging. And I could, whilst meeting new people, I could hear about their stories and I could share mine. And it was just a really great thing to exchange information, culture, etc. So through the conversations I was having with local people, that kind of one of the highlights was that I didn't know much about my local community. And this was such a great way to find out more and to develop my confidence in going out and speaking with people. And of course, improving my English, which was kind of really, this had a big impact on that. This project was temporary, so it ended by the time I went into college. So I, again, kind of went back to my studies, but I still really loved volunteering and I didn't find an opportunity that I could get involved in at college. But then when I was applying to universities and wanting to access higher education, of course, the issue of accessing university as an asylum seeker came up. And so I was really focused on finding scholarships and ways to continue my education. And luckily, I was able to secure a scholarship at university. And by coincidence, I found the group that campaigned for my scholarship at university, a group of students that made the scholarship possible and helped me get into uni. And that's when I was like, I want to volunteer with you. I want to kind of be part of this community and understand how you're working and what you do. So that's when I got involved with Student Action for Refugees. Later down the line, and I can speak about that later in the session, I think a really good thing is that from that student group at university, I was connected with the National STAR team or Student Action for Refugees team. And I went there a couple of times to London to help with some resources, to do a little bit more of raising awareness of what the scholarship meant to me and why it's important. So you could say a more of activism or advocacy role there with STAR. And that really opened up my eyes to the sector of higher education and the rights that people with a sanctuary status have. And I learned so much about that and about the importance of my voice in that platform, basically. In general, it really, really boosted my confidence in not just speaking about my story, but also how much difference that can make and the impact of that. others and on the sector in general. And that led me to finding out about City of Sanctuary after I graduated. And I said, I just saw the impact, and I wanted and made the decision to make that my career. And what I work on at the moment is the ways I can help increase or facilitate that access to higher education because of the difference it has made to my life. So it's not very kind of the volunteering I did isn't linked or related, but it's that principle and the basis of wanting to make a difference and using my experience to help raise awareness of different things that could positively impact people's lives, that I said, this is what I want to do. And that's what made me happy, really. So that's briefly my journey. Thank you for listening.
Very much. Thank you, Mariam. Okay, so next we have Moses.
Hi, thanks so much, Pascal. Firstly, it's a real honour to be asked to contribute here, to be a part of this panel, and to be part of Breaking Barriers Refugee Week. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. And also thanks for encouraging me to think critically about our experiences in activism and volunteering. I hope some of the things I say can be helpful. I think it's really useful to really be intentional and thoughtful about the work we're doing. So I appreciate that as well. As you can see, I removed most of the footsteps on my slide because it does feel like I'm quite early on in my journey. And in deciding how to use this time, I kind of realized that what has made my journey meaningful is the people that I've met on it rather than the journey itself. And so, you know, it's them that is keeping me coming back to these activities and line of work. So, you know, with your permission, over the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to tell a couple of stories about the people who are either in these images or represented by them. Let's start on the top left. John Henderson was born in the 1970s in Kilburn. John sold books from his curbside stall on the bridge which connects West Hampstead and Kilburn, and I grew up in between those two places, so I would see him regularly selling books, trying to raise enough money to resolve his living situation, and unintentionally scaring potential customers because of his appearance and struggle with addiction, which came to control his life. But with the support of the community at different times in different ways, he became a central figure in the area, beloved by hundreds of people who would connect with him over his own betterment, which he was often striving for and speaking about. And community members, including myself, were determined to carve out a better and fairer settlement for him, even if that just meant sitting with him on the ground for 20 minutes a week. He died in May 2019, and it was only the outpouring of emotion following his death which kind of made a lot of people realize how valuable he was in all of our lives, and that the value of supporting him was no less valuable for being ultimately unsuccessful. And his life brought people together in an amazing way, and a very powerful way, which continues to motivate me today. His death kind of brought us all together. If we move rightwards on the slide, a moment which kind of threatened to pull us all apart was the fatal fire in Grenfell Tower in 2017. And I'm still very angry, incredibly angry, about the fact that this was allowed to happen and the state's response to it and the continued unserved search for justice regarding it. I've included it here because of how deeply emotional and transformative moments in my life that fire was. I grew up about 2 miles away from it, and volunteered in its shadow when in the immediate aftermath. And while I met loads of people with whom to mourn the human and social tragedy, I also realized at that point that it was a hugely political event, and there's a type of political activism which I want to speak to in reference, which is quite different from volunteering, and is more about holding people to account and seeking justice for things which have gone wrong, and for the purposes of framing and building a world which we're going to share for the remainder of our lives. Let's continue bottom left to a picture which was taken in Ceres, which is on the northern border of Greece and the southern border of Bulgaria. I volunteered there teaching football skills and leading yoga classes with Kurdish Yazidi men. I went with little knowledge of experience with forced migrants. What I found was that they were human, and that the dehumanization of refugees in the West was saying more about the people doing the dehumanization than anything else. I found that they were men, and that was important. I found that they were restricted and controlled by the state. I found that I was raw, I was vulnerable and yet responsible, which is a very scary position to be in. And we went on to form a team which held regular training sessions and matches with the local community. And that experience of being a part of a team, part of a community, finding joy in difficult situations, forming relationships with people, including and especially fellow volunteers, which transcended national boundaries and which we've maintained today, was a very powerful experience for me. Now I'm running out of time, so let me tell you about the final image on this slide, which represents what I've been doing since January 2021, which is directing an organization called ScreenShare. ScreenShare is also a community, but it's different, and not just because we fix laptops rather than referee football matches. It's different because it's more strategic, it's administrative, it's technological. It's about finding people's skills and spare resources and redirecting them rather than facilitating activity ourselves. And the picture is of a young man called Bakr. Bakr is 17 years old. In fact, that was taken last year, so he's probably 18 now, but he arrived with his family from Syria in 2018. And at that time, he was enrolled in a college and wanted to be a graphic designer. Or more specifically, he wanted to make the signs in Leicester Square, which I think is more about like visual design. But anyway, his parents don't speak English. The family are on universal credit. He is responsible for facilitating their transition in an immigration status from limited leave to remain to indefinite leave to remain, and ultimately to citizenship. When I met them, there was no laptop in the family. He was relying on his friends' phones, which meant that his communication with his solicitors and the support services was intermittent. He couldn't fill out or sign the forms that he needed to. He was in college, but he knew that he needed to go to university to pursue his goal, but didn't know how to do that. There are actually two laptops in the photo. There's a Mac on the left and a Windows on the right. I went round to the family's home and explained that the Windows would last for longer, the battery was better, but that he had the choice about which one to choose. He chose the shiny Mac, and I haven't heard from him since. And I think actually that's the greatest achievement of what we've been able to do. It's not the fact that we've just given out 122 devices, it's that only 3 of them have come back with some issue in that year and a bit. So, we're not giving people devices which are old or useless, which makes some reference to the situation that they're in. I hear a kind of beggars can't be choosers kind of vibe. It's actually quite the opposite. We give people high quality devices in order to raise them up from the situation that they're in. So yeah, that's a bit of a flavor of what I've been doing, why I've done it, and hopefully what it has felt like to be a part of that journey.
Thank you so much, Modest, for sharing the stories. I think it makes everything a lot more powerful. Okay, so next we have Anna.
Hi, and thank you very much for having me and Refugee here today. Nice to be amongst such brilliant partners and partner organisations as well, including University of Leicester. So I feel that this conversation has come at a particularly poignant moment in time for a lot of people. Myself, I'm sure everyone attending and here feels the hopelessness of not being able to do as much as any of us would like, but also looking for those avenues of where we can create a difference. So my story and following Refugee's story is that a very similar moment occurred for me the day that the little boy Aylan Kurdi died, and the images of his body were on the beach. His body on the beach were on the front page of every newspaper. So I was working at a small local law firm as a conveyancing assistant, which if anyone's ever bought or sold a house, is probably the most boring job you could ever have, and feeling incredibly frustrated with the lack of being able to help. So I had friends who'd been volunteering in Calais. I had connected on Facebook with a number of different refugee welcome groups, and we were donating, we were collecting food items and clothes to send out to both Syria and Greece, but just feeling that this wasn't enough. And then that day with the image of Aylin, for me, the moment was at the firm, we had newspapers every morning laid out on the front desk, and there was 6 papers all with the same image, and everyone was just walking past as if it was a normal day. And it made me feel physically sick, and I just felt like, no, this is I need to do something today. And so Tamsin, who is our co-founder, wrote a post on a refugee welcome Elmbridge group saying Lucy was the same age as Aylin, her daughter. I can't sit back and not do anything. Does anyone know of anything else that people are doing to help? Similar to posts that we're seeing on social media now about Ukraine. And I commented saying, no, I have no idea, but I'm following this. And if you think of anything or come up with anything, please let me know. And then Luke, who was a surgeon at our local hospital, he commented saying, should we meet up for a coffee anyway and just have a little brainstorm about what we might be able to do? So we met up in Starbucks in Kingston, 3 complete strangers, and but all in the local community, and we said, what should we do? And so we went on Facebook and we searched Lesbos, because that was where it was, in the media so much, and we ended up sending a friend request to a lady called Meryl Grave, who was a Dutch volunteer who on her own had just gone over to Lesbos. And I mean, the naivety, she always says she packed bikinis in her bag because she was just like, oh, maybe I'll go on holiday and volunteer on the side, kind of thing, not having any idea what she was going and what to expect. She'd been there for 3 weeks by the time that we messaged her, and we messaged her just to say, is there anything we could do to help? And she replied, and she said a really heartbreaking message to us, just saying, is there any way you could get doctors and nurses here, because people are arriving and there is no medical care. People are waiting, again, as we're seeing at the Polish border and the Hungarian border now, the same, for up to 60 hours in cold, damp conditions, which means that people are getting very sick with basic healthcare problems like hypothermia. I mean, we had cases of trench foot because there was no way of getting people's feet dry, etc. Is there anything you could do? And Luke was like, why don't I ask the hospital if we can take some doctors and nurses and just go? And he did, and his management, and so much of this depends on so many people being willing to make allowances in their everyday life to help. The management at his hospital said that they would grant up to 2 weeks of unpaid leave for doctors and nurses that volunteered. And so we ended up with 12 doctors and nurses, and a partner organisation called International Health Partners donated to us 300 kilos or something, 17 pallets, I remember, of medication, and said, you can take this out with you. And we got on a plane, and I mean, silly things, we bought EasyJet flights, and then EasyJet wouldn't ship the meds because they only ship for UNICEF. So in the airport at Heathrow, we were like, quick, and then BA came over and were like, we'll fly it for you for free. So the doctors flew with the meds, and we flew on this EasyJet flight and landed in Lesbos and had no idea what we were doing and no idea what to expect. And then when we arrived, I think we all thought there would be a huge presence of very large NGOs that we've come to expect to be there in these scenarios. And there just wasn't. There was little NGO presence at all, and thousands of people arriving every day in very difficult circumstances, and thousands and hundreds at that point of people having capsized on the way, sadly fatalities and injuries. So we set up we called it a field hospital. It was 3 tents, one for men, one for women, and one for children, and we just did what we could for 2 weeks. We ended up staying for 5, and there was something amazing about the fact that there was no organisation, that we were just people, and we were just doctors and nurses who were qualified turning up to help. And it took away what I believe has become so overcomplicated within the sector of non-profit organisations or humanitarian aid organisations, that all these layers have been put in, and yes, of course, there need to be very basic safeguarding measures, but so much has been put in to prevent humans helping humans. And that was what we were able to do. And through that, similar to how Moses was saying, and Sarah's and our experience throughout Greece and working in the UK has been, when you meet people and hear their stories and you ask how you can help, resoundingly, human beings want the same things wherever we are in the world, and that is to live safely and privately, and to be able to have an education and provide for our families and live independently. And I've never met a person for whom that isn't, that isn't what their basic needs are. And so I was like, okay, well, how can we help people do that? Our work in Greece, we ended up supporting the local hospitals and crowdfunding to do that. And then people that we'd met in Lesbos started arriving in the UK, and 4 people were in our local community just outside of London. And we said to them, well, what do you need? How can we help you? And English language was the first thing. So of the 4 people that we met, 2 people who had fled partway through their university studies, one from Syria and one from Iran, and then a neurosurgeon and a dentist. And it was like, well, how can we help? We need to do English language. And we found that the English language provision at that point throughout the UK was appalling. ESOL had been cut, and where ESOL was available, it was very basic, or one level in one area, oversubscribed. And so we were just Googling English language classes, and we found a school called Wimbledon School of English, went along there and said, is there anything that you could do to help us? And I will never forget it. We just walked in, we were just 2 strangers off the street, and their 5 members of senior staff came down, sat us in a room and said, what do you need? We're crying out to help. And from that, we've grown to now have a nationwide programme working with partner English language schools throughout the UK, who all offer us spaces for free, around 251 spaces today. And it's an enabler. It helps people have that language qualification and tuition that they then need to either go on to university or to be able to get their first full-time role in the UK. Following that, we now have a loan program where we give people money to be able to requalify and return to work, because a lot of what we found was that a lot of structures and things that are put in place are there to remove dependency and remove reliance and tell people in a vulnerable position, you need this, when actually a lot of people need access to cash and access to the ability to get those things for themselves. So we set up a loan program. I mean, we've not got any background in finance or lending. We got laughed out of rooms at Bank of America and this, but we just believed that the people we met, we knew, we trusted, would give us the money back. And we found some people along the way that believed in the programs. We've now lent 1.4 million, and our repayment rate is 98.7%. So we get to go back and have our pretty women moment, as I call it, with some of those big names. But it's amazing, and it just goes to show, what you can do. And I think my advice is just that I think with humanitarian aid in the sector, it's become, it's become a little bit to the point where it's alienated the right people from working there. Some charities will only accept you if you've got a master's degree, or if you've got 5 languages under your belt. And actually, it's a sector that's primarily about helping other humans. And I think volunteering is a really powerful way of getting into that and finding out maybe the things that you can do on your own within that. So that's just my journey and where we are now.
Thank you so much, Anna. Okay, and finally, we've got Zishan, who is going to talk to us about his journey.
Hi everyone. I've got I suppose the pleasure of going last, I think, after everyone else's really impressive presentations, with my extremely bare slides as well. So I suppose I'll just start by introducing myself. So I'm Zishan. I'm a junior doctor. I'm hoping to be an oncologist, so I'm currently in training for that at the minute. And I've been working in Leicester since about 2018 when I moved here. I grew up in Dubai, so I always grew up in an extremely multicultural society with loads and loads of different people. So I suppose my journey with volunteering sort of starts when I went for a movie in 2016. So I went to go and see this movie, Doctor Strange, and the movie was all right, but actually there was an ad for the Refugee Council right before the movie, which I was sort of really, really moved by. That was around the height of a lot of sort of migrants fleeing the Middle East and crossing over the Mediterranean on boats. I think Anna mentioned this earlier, but I was also really moved by pictures of Alan Kurdi in particular. I think I suppose the seed was kind of planted there that I sort of felt a little bit of despair really, the way things were going. I mean, I'm an immigrant to the UK. I grew up in Dubai as well, but my experience is just completely different. I was welcomed in a completely different way, and all of that is purely because of luck of where I was born and my background. So I was in my third medical school at this point, seeing this ad, and possibly a few months later, I after sort of looking around, really, I contacted STAR, so STAR Nottingham, again, Student Action for Refugees, which Maria mentioned earlier, and just said, right, I'm a third year medical student, I've got next to no skills, how can I help? And they've sort of said, well, we've got resettled refugees coming in on quite a regular basis, and again, Anna mentioned this earlier about English language, you can sort of help them with just really basic English language skills, and so about once a week, we would sort of, all these really committed students would sort of meet up once a week and teach, locally resettled refugees just simple English. That sort of went by the wayside for a couple of years until I started working as a doctor, just because of exams and that sort of thing. At which point I had a little bit more time in my hands, and I thought, right, I'd really like to get involved again. So I sort of did just a little bit of research. I found out about City of Sanctuary Leicester, the University of Leicester, and the English language teaching unit here. At which point I just sent an email saying, hi, I'm Zishan, I've got, I have worked with STAR before, but not for very long, and I'd just like to help, so what can I do? At which point I met Alex and Pascal and the head of the LTU, who sort of had a really good idea about just sort of helping locally resettled refugee doctors with their English language speaking skills. So just a bit of background on this. The path to becoming a doctor in the UK, when you start from medical school, in the UK is really streamlined. But if you were to come from abroad, it is incredibly difficult. There's loads of sort of barriers along the way. It's just a maze, really. Most people don't really know what to do, or they get stuck in the system somewhere in terms of a certificate that can't be translated to English exactly the way the GMC wants it, or they just struggle with the English language speaking exam, so what's called the OET, the Occupational English Test. So I thought, right, this is something I can do as a clinician myself. I've sort of got a background with this, and we can kind of help doctors and healthcare professionals that have come into the UK either as migrants or as refugees, and just kind of help them pass this exam. So we set up sort of weekly communication skills sessions for locally resettled doctors, so about once every 2 weeks for a couple of hours, which is unfortunately as much time as I could spare at the time, working on a full on-call rota. So I think that sort of progressed along for a while, and then throughout I was sort of thinking that we should probably get our local trust involved as well. So about a year later, I sort of sent an email just into the ether of the hospital email system to say, hi, we're sort of doing this locally with the University of Leicester. The trust, kind of has sort of, I suppose, a social responsibility really to kind of help out. And there's a bit of personal gain there as well, because doctors that we can then equip with the appropriate skills can then come and sort of, work locally. And I suppose there was a bit of a selfish aspect to my sort of volunteering as well, because the full on-call rota makes my life a bit easier. So I sort of sent off that email. I didn't hear back from anyone for months. To be honest, I actually forgot about it until about 6 months later, when I received an email in my mailbox that had gone sort of through the entire executive director of the trust and the local clinical commissioning group. And then one person got back to me to say, right, let's meet and see what we can do. So I've left the box at the top kind of empty, because we're sort of not really sure where we're going from here. And, it's sort of just meant to represent where we could go. But what we're doing at the minute is after that email, we sort of had a 10-week sort of crash course with our local trust and the University of Leicester for locally resettled doctors and nurses on communication skills. All of that obviously was disrupted by COVID, but we're now doing it sort of virtually, and we sort of advertising it nationally. So we're really teaching doctors across the country how to communicate more effectively with English and supporting them with passing these exams. And I think that is part of what we provide, but the other part of what we provide is just sort of you know, being a clinician, I feel like I can relate with other clinicians quite easily, and it's that kind of support to support with not only the English language speaking exams, but also their professional exams, their PLAB exams, their MRCP or MRCS exams. And I think I've heard some really incredible stories, and I'm really excited to see where we go from here.
Thank you very much, Jishan. Okay, so I think that's been a great introduction to our panelists, and we've probably already kind of covered the first question. So we are going to go straight to the second question for our panel. I would say I'm going to start by asking Mariam, what impact has your volunteering or activism had on your life?
Thank you so much, Pascal. I would say kind of starting, it made me, as I said, kind of learn more about my community and kind of the society that I was in. Personally, I think when I arrived, as many people with refugee or asylum background will know, if you've gone through the asylum process, it's very hostile, and you don't know what people's kind of misconceptions are or what they think about it, and there isn't usually like a network. And I think for me, being able to work with people who haven't had the experience or haven't gone through the system, and being able to maybe talk about it or to correct some misconceptions, especially from 2015 onwards, when lots of the media was covering the fact that many people were fleeing for safety, not in a good way, and in a very kind of threatening way, and as a kind of a phenomenon or something that people will have to deal with or live with, rather than a human approach to how people are fleeing, and that all they want is safety, as Anna was saying before. I think it has benefited me and others as well, in that I was able to go out of my comfort zone and not be afraid to speak about the fact that I am seeking sanctuary, and that I do kind of deserve the spaces and the things that I need to carry on with my life, like education, like employment, like, you know, talking to people about this topic. And then for people as well to learn about the experiences that I've had. They haven't met anyone else who has had to seek sanctuary, and all their experience has been from newspapers or TV. So it's really made me develop that connection with people, and help, as I said, kind of correct some of the misconceptions. But also it has given, I guess, in the community, in my community of people, like friends and family, the sense of how important volunteering is for me personally and for the wider community. And in having a positive representation from someone who has had to seek asylum and who maybe looks different from people in the local region, and you know, what work I was doing whilst I was volunteering. I think it has inspired some of my community to go into volunteering as well, and that has been kind of the biggest impact. So even if it's people in the local community or people that like kind of friends or family, it's just knowing that activism and volunteering could have such a big impact on their lives and others' lives, and encourages them to do the same, has been really great, because I've always wanted to give back, and really any positive experience I have, I want to kind of share it with people and say, this is something that you can do as well. So I would say in terms of higher education and access to university, the biggest impact it has had on my life is, first of all, kind of I understand now that the opportunities I've had are, again, because of luck and fortune, but also because I was open to sharing my experience and my story. And a lot of that has meant that lots of students were able to access higher education in the same way, or be able to learn about how to access it. And that has impacted on my life as well, because I knew that those platforms I was using to help spread awareness about this campaign are platforms that were willing to understand and willing to make change. And it was kind of my opportunity to make sure that I'm in a place that makes a difference, and in a place that I could help people understand what this means and to support the campaign a bit more. So really, any impact that has kind of resulted on people or communities has also really impacted me and has been the best part of it, really.
I feel I want to ask this question to all the panelists, because this will be something everybody has got a very different answer for. So in any random order, Anna, I feel that your volunteering has probably completely changed your life from working as a conveyancer.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's changed it in every aspect, in work, my home life, everything, but only for the better. Yes, more challenging many days, but it's also given me, like, the opportunity to do something and change and make a difference in the world, and I'll always be grateful for that.
Okay, what about Zane?
Thank you, Pascal. Yeah, to be honest, I feel like it's probably made me a bit happier with my own life, and I feel perhaps a little less despair when I read the news, because not even despair necessarily. I feel a little bit less helpless, because I feel like I'm just sort of trying to do something about stuff that you hear, that you read about in the news. And I guess to answer the question, it's quite complicated, really, what impact it's had. It's kind of made me feel a bit more at peace with myself, really. And I think I've sort of met loads of people along the way that are as motivated, and every time I talk to people about it, whenever I do, I find that generally everyone kind of starts from a good intention. Everyone kind of wants to help, and I think helping people down that path, or directing them down that path, and seeing the results of that has made me a lot happier generally with my own life. So yeah.
And Moses?
Yeah, I think I probably gave the game away a bit in my bit at the beginning. I think that kind of the impact that it's had on my life has been through the people that I've met. I think it's valuable to meet new people and build respectful, supportive, boundaried, intentional relationships, supportive relationships with them. I think that's what gives my life meaning. Not only leaving the world in a slightly better place to how we found it, but actually working with fellow humans to in a supportive way, which is kind of empowering rather than belittling. I think also people, when I say about my work, they often say, "Oh, that must be so fulfilling," and it is a massive cliche, but it is true that the moments and the memories which come from this line of work are incredibly powerful and meaningful. And this line of work has been very central and consequential at important junctures of my life, and molded me into who I am. It also positions me as an agent in something much larger. In a political sense, volunteering and activism has kind of made me realize that selflessness and communitarianism is that is diversity. That's the lifeblood of diversity. It's not just the source of a personal thing. It's something much larger than that. Just one other thing about the impact that it's had on my life. One really annoying thing about activism and volunteering is that it doesn't actually always work. Some change is much more easy to deliver than others. So, defeating the Nationality and Borders Bill is more difficult than refurbishing a laptop. And therefore, you kind of need this hopefulness, this kind of positivity, this belief that things are going to get better, which I have found kind of structures my life and kind of filters out into other areas of my life. We have potentially this like image of the angry activist, but actually it's an image of hopefulness and positivity, which I think has been the most substantial impact on my day-to-day life.
Just to add to Moses' point as well, I think that is where a lot of the hope can come from, is engaging with other people who've taken that path, so chosen to volunteer and engage with their communities and help. And I think that's where when it feels so insurmountable, some of the problems in the world, like the Nationality and Borders Bill and current cabinet and things like that, it's finding the other people who believe in making that change, and who have different ideas and different energy around how they're going to do that. And I think that's what changed my life for sure a lot as well, is just realizing how many other people are out there, and how much that can enrich, but also how much that can change.
Thank you so much. So we've decided to mix it up a little bit with the order of the questions. We thought question 6 is actually really relevant and important, which is, what challenges have you faced on your journey and how did you overcome them? Let's go with Moses.
Sure. Yeah, this was a really good question, and I think it's really important to be critical about kind of like what the challenges are. I think that one of the challenges that I've found is that you may find that this type of work isn't rewarded in the same way as the work which produces money is rewarded. You can imagine my surprise when I found that the things which are important to me, didn't make lots and lots of money. The nexus of our economic system isn't designed for redistribution. So that means that there are consequences for people who believe that value sits outside of money. We know it does, of course it does. We need to look after ourselves, but don't be turned off by the fact that the primary reimbursement of this type of work isn't necessarily financial. I think the other kind of central challenge is that people may oppose you. You may think this is the most obvious thing to do. This is the good thing to do. Let's all make it better and fairer. And actually that might not be the case. Anna said, you've got to find the people who agree with you. You'll also in that search find people who don't. Activism is fundamentally about change, which means that necessarily it's going to come up against conservatism with a small c. And when we experience that, we must listen very carefully and work with the people who disagree with us, but not allow their opposition to deter the action which we feel and have thought carefully about flowing from our beliefs and values. So I think, I suppose my message is when those moments come, good luck and stay strong in them.
Thank you, Moses. Zishan.
Thanks. Thank you, Pascal. And I suppose probably a major challenge I've personally faced, and I would include myself in this, probably short attention spans generally. I find that, especially when people are kind of caught up crisis to crisis or dealing with their own personal issues, trying to not necessarily push an agenda, but trying to sort of make change, it can be quite difficult. And as you kind of move through, again, like volunteering is a part of what I do in my life, and kind of trying to manage time and make sure that I continue to do this work that I find really personally satisfying, but also makes a real difference in a different way to what we do otherwise, has been a bit of a challenge. But I think what I've learned from that challenge is the power of probably persistence and sort of knowing to kind of always pick things up again, even if it's been a month, if it's been 2 months, been 6 months, to always sort of go back and respond to that email and think, right, what do we do? Because if you actively try and keep it in the forefront and you know yourself and know that you find this personally satisfying, the challenge of like a short attention span and time management is one that is quite very much possible to overcome. I'm not sure what everyone else thinks, but yeah.
All right, Maya.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with all the points that were raised before. And I think personally, I would want to just talk about maybe some of the challenges that someone with lived experience might feel whilst doing volunteering or activism in this sector. I think it's really important, I found through my experience, to kind of safeguard and protect your own well-being. You might find yourself in spaces where you're speaking about something that you've gone through kind of in a storytelling approach, or you're trying to make an impact to a policy, for example. And, as Moses was saying, there will be maybe people that will oppose you, or maybe you'll find that the scale of the change or the influence you're making isn't as big as you hope or you wish. So I think it's really important to, first of all, protect your well-being in terms of your boundaries and what you want to share and when you want to share it, and being in the right mind kind of headspace to do this, because you might, people listening, they might not be living through it. It will be impacting them a lot, and they want to kind of make change. But for you, it might be something that's still continuing. So, for example, I'll kind of talk about access to higher education and the policies around it. And even though I was able to access university, I have a brother who has very limited leave and who's still facing those challenges. So kind of being prepared for maybe things in terms of any opposition or changes not happening as quickly, making sure that you are doing this when you're ready, mentally ready, and also just reminding yourself that any small change or conversations that you're having within your work, within your circles, it is great change, and without you it wouldn't be happening, and those conversations wouldn't be continuing. So I think it goes back to the conversation of how helpful we feel and how kind of daunting that could be sometimes, looking at the bigger and the wider scale of the issues in the world. But reflecting on actually we are human beings, and the difference we're making within our circles is important, and it is making a difference, whether it's educating a family member or speaking to a friend that you met about this issue, and that kind of can escalate and catalyze even more actions and more positive impact. It doesn't all fall on your shoulders. I know I've had times where I felt I need to attend every event and do everything to help this campaign grow and secure a scholarship for another student. Otherwise, it can make that life difference or life change. So giving yourself, I think, a good break to be mentally prepared and to give your best, because without kind of protecting your mental well-being, you won't be able to give your best. So again, kind of understanding how storytelling can sometimes impact on people. If you work with people with lived experience, or if you are someone with lived experience, it can be it can sometimes influence in terms of feeling the trauma or kind of reliving it, and that can have a really huge impact. So I think it's really good to understand your boundaries, and only kind of get involved in something when you feel ready, basically, and be easy on yourself. Basically, that's the advice.
Thank you, Maya. I think we can probably all relate to this point you've just made. Anna, would you like to also share your experience or add something?
I think one of the challenges I face is the fear of getting it wrong, like the fear of doing something that maybe would make things worse rather than better. I don't know what the answer is, or overcoming that. I guess just listening to people that you're working with or that you're trying to support, to try and best inform what it is that you're doing. And then I think there's some really structural challenges to volunteering in the UK that are issues that it would be great to see more support for. So money and time is sadly something that prevents a huge number of people from volunteering. The only reason Refugee exists is because I was able to live with family friends for a year rent free and didn't need to cover my own costs, and that's an insane amount of privilege to be able to do that. There is a number of people out of there who would love the opportunity to spend a year creating something and don't have that, and I think that's wrong. I think there should be more support organizations and support mechanisms to help people who maybe from volunteering have found something they want to make full time. And the last few years I've come across a few, but they're very much directed at people already in pretty good jobs and helping them get into social impact. There's very little supporting people who don't have that, who maybe don't have a job or aren't in full-time work to be able to volunteer. And I think that's really sad. And time as well. I think employers can do a lot more. And I think, again, it doesn't need to be the big employers. There's a lot of community-based employers who would benefit greatly from supporting their employees to volunteer in the local community. But it's not really talked about very much. And then I think kind of seeing volunteers as a resource within organizations is another thing, and that's kind of an education piece that needs to be done around organizations, and has been a challenge. Often organizations will see volunteering as a bit of a token add-on. It's nice to have, but they could survive without. And I think actually there's a huge amount of wealth of support that comes from those volunteering communities, and they should be more ingrained into organizations and inform practice better, because it's quite often volunteers that are at the front line of whatever that charity is doing and are spending the most amount of time with those they're supporting, but yet have little dialogue back into kind of the strategy of how organisations work. So I think they're the current challenges facing the volunteering sector. And then in terms of activism, Moses touched on it, but I think engaging with people who disagree with you is just so key and has been lost in so many places. Not allowing that to become argumentative or hostile. I think it's really important to have those conversations. People aren't gonna learn or change without engagement, and particularly when we have such a polarizing, government and such extreme arguments. So yeah, they're the challenges that I think.
Thank you very much, Anna. Okay, so we'll go on to the last question to the panel before taking any question from participants. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to start volunteering or activism? Let's start with Zane, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Pascal. So I've thought about this question a lot, and I think my advice personally would be sort of just try and know yourself, try and think about what you're interested in, what you can provide, even if it's just time, and try and sort of start local. That would be my advice. So look locally to see what you can provide. Look at your local organisation. Look at your local student, for example, if you're at university, Student Action for Refugees, and just try and follow the thread, really. I touched on this earlier, but I think persistence is really, really key if you kind of want to make any sort of change, even if it's sort of to one person's life, really. So don't be discouraged by longer timescales or by sometimes what may come across as apathy from people that you engage with. So yeah, probably those two things, well, three things really: sort of act local, stay persistent, and kind of just sort of think about yourself, think about what you might be able to provide. Again, even if it's just time.
Thank you. Let's go to Anna.
I would say just to go for it, and also use social media to find those opportunities. I think it's an incredibly powerful tool to connect and find those volunteering opportunities in your local area or further afield.
All right, Maya?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the main advice I would kind of give or emphasize from what Zishan said is find what you are most driven by, passionate about, maybe angry at, be confident about the skills you have and the strengths. I think we all have strengths in specific areas. Embrace them and be confident about them, even if you have worries about kind of what Anna was mentioning before about doing the wrong thing or not being able to make the change that you want to make. I think just as we said, go for it with the strength and with the passion you have for that cause, and connecting with the right people, either locally or nationally. And you won't start with knowing everything or knowing how to do everything at all. It's just like anything else. It's progress, and it gradually happens. And it's, for me personally, it was kind of, as I think someone said before, it's the kind of joy in difficult situations or light in quite kind of a dark time. So it is going to be uplifting and rewarding. And so I think that's what will help drive you and motivate you the most. So yeah, that was my advice.
Moses, would you like to add anything?
Sure, yeah. I'd echo what Zishan said about persistence, because you'll need that. But I think also with this type of work, the more, what you give is what you get. The more you invest, the more you can invest, the more you'll get out of it. And so if I was giving some advice, I'd say, take it as seriously as you can. There's this, I was reading Sally Rooney's book the other day, and right at the beginning, there's this line, that's the thing about work. If it was any good, you'd do it for free. And that is what volunteering and activism is. It's good, unpaid work. And so for that to be effective and meaningful, you need to take the good things about work, the structure, the purpose, the responsibility, the development, and bring it into this line of work, volunteering and activism. So yeah, treat it with the importance it deserves. And I think also, just to kind of speak to what Mariam mentioned earlier about representation. And by the way, Mariam, you're not only inspiring for the people within your community, but also beyond it. One should be conscious of their own influence and the kind of the potential impact, positive and negative, that you can have on people who you're interacting with. And so, you know, to be thoughtful and reflective about the impact that you're having, encouraging people to go on similar journeys, but also, you know, becoming important people in other people's lives, I think is really, really important as you take your steps along that journey.
Thank you, Moses. I can also say I've been massively inspired by Mariam. I remember the first time I saw her speak at the University of Sanctuaries conference, and I was wowed. So this is a very mutual feeling. All right, so now I'm not sure if we have any questions from the audience at this point. If you have any questions for our panelists, be quick, type them into the chat box, please.
So we have a question from Frances in the chat. So she says, Mariam, I've seen myself how much of a positive impact volunteering, such as working in charity shops, has had on improving some of my refugee students' English level and also their mental well-being. But it's often really daunting and challenging for them to find or access these opportunities. What do you think we need to do to make this easier for sanctuary seekers? Thanks for the question, Frances.
Yeah, thank you so much, Frances, for the question. You're absolutely right. I think I remember kind of back to when I was seeking asylum and the friends I had in the community, they the first kind of place that they would seek volunteering opportunities would be in charity shops, and to get the to basically get the same benefits from volunteering as communicating with people, meeting new people, developing their skills and their English. But it can be, as you said, difficult for them sometimes to get those opportunities, to know how to get them, or to even kind of have the right references and things in place to be able to secure a volunteering place. And I think because the asylum process, there's no time frame to it, and it's just kind of unrestricted on how much you will wait. People look for volunteering as that kind of outlook to help them whilst they're waiting, and to give them a kind of a purpose and a sense of meaning whilst they're waiting as well. I think one of the ways is really raising awareness with charity shops about this and how they can work with their sanctuary seekers. So their City of Sanctuary, there's we have a stream supporting shops. It's called Shops of Sanctuary, and it's about how they can work more effectively with their local City of Sanctuary groups, or even independently, to welcome more people with asylum status. Making the process for them easier, making sure there is support, representation, translation, etc., for them to be able to access these opportunities. So I think a lot of it is about helping connect people with those opportunities as much as possible, and making sure that the shops in the area are aware that of the experiences of people seeking asylum, why they seek to volunteer, how they can support them a little bit more. So it's a collaborative, I think, initiative that can be possible between either the university and the Shops of Sanctuary, or the City of Sanctuary group and the shops, just making sure that awareness is there and what kind of things that they can do. And I can share with you what resources there are for the shops as well, so that they can make this process easier for people seeking asylum.
Thank you, Mariam. I don't think we have any more questions from the audience. So before we run out of time, I'm going to go back to Alex, who is going to do a little roundup of the session.
Hi, so thank you so much to all of our panelists. What you've shared with us today has been incredibly powerful and inspiring, and at times also really moving. And it's given us a really useful insight into the difference that volunteering and activism can make, not only to other people, but also the kind of personal transformation that you've kind of undergone as well in the process. And what's been really interesting for me is to see that everyone has got a very kind of different personal journey that you shared here today. But there are some themes which have kind of come out really strongly, which kind of resonate throughout all of your journeys. So one of those themes is the theme of human connection, and that came out so strongly in all of your journeys. Human connection with the people who you're helping directly, but also the connection with other volunteers, activists, change makers, that power and that hope that comes from engaging with other people who are also working for change. But also this kind of feeling of agency as well. Again, just kind of rather than just sitting back passively and, you know, sitting and watching things happen despairingly, actually the feeling that actually we can take action, we can make change. It kind of reminds me of this quote that we often hear, like, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. And that really came out. All of you kind of took the ball by the horns and decided that you were going to do something rather than kind of wait for others to do something. Also, what came out for me was this idea of inspiration and hope and vision. So when we were talking about challenges, you said, you know, not to let other people's opposition deter you, or to let challenges deter you. Keep persisting, to keep the vision and the cause in mind, rather than you know, kind of succumbing to kind of negative and kind of challenging things. And what's also come out is kind of the fact that what you're doing has inspired others around you as well, just like you yourselves have been inspired by others around you who are making a difference. And the other thing that came out was just like the transformational nature of what you're doing. And like I said, kind of many of you have said that it's changed your own lives for the better. You feel happier, you feel less helpless, and it's also kind of been a way of kind of meaning making in your own lives. So yeah, it's been so fascinating to hear you talk about that today, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to, just very quickly, we're just going to show this slide about volunteering opportunities. So you did all mention a little bit at the end about you know, what advice you would give people who want to get into volunteering. And so here are some useful links for different organisations. We will share these slides with everyone afterwards, and a bit more information as well in the email that we send you. But before we finish, I'm just going to hand over to Phil Horspool, who's just going to say a few words at the end.
Yeah, I imagine some of you are probably wondering who Phil Horspool is. I better just introduce myself. I'm the director of the Centre for International Training and Education, and whenever I get introduced by Alex, she introduces me as her boss. A part of the centre is we have a sanctuary seekers unit. Actually, Alex has said much of what I was going to say. I managed to come along to this whole session, and I'm so glad I did. I feel genuinely moved hearing your stories. All absolutely fantastic. Echoing what Alex was saying, you know, this message about people, you guys going out and finding opportunities that come your way is, you know, personally, you know, my experience, like several of you have mentioned, goes back to Alan Kurdi in 2015. My wife went over to Greece for the first time shortly after seeing those images, and I remember her, you know, she's been back, I don't know how many times now, 8 or 9 times, despite bringing up children and having a full-time job. I remember her saying to me, she can't believe that she's still going back. You know, that, you know, in a, you know, what kind of world is it that we can't sort of seem to be able to change direction on this, and you know, these things are still happening all over the world, and even on our own doorstep at the moment. Seems kind of quite incredible. But so yeah, hope is a great thing, but I think they're also, it can be kind of quite despairing at times, and it's great when we can come together and celebrate achievements like we have done today. I mean, I got involved as a direct result of that as well, because I thought, what can we do? What can I do in my position in the university? And hopefully you will all agree that as a university, we've done quite a lot. Just the 4 people who are here today, it just shows the kind of breadth of kind of people and different organizations that we're working with. And, we're always looking for new opportunities. And fortunately, we are very well supported by the leadership of the university and what we're trying to do, who kind of share our beliefs around this. Just finally, I just want to kind of say that this week of events and everything that we do would not be possible without 3 people, 2 of them who are here. There is Julie, there is Alex, and there Pascal, and they're absolutely unbelievable. A lot of what we've done as a university has been down to their kind of fantastic work and linking up with you guys, and all of those things. They get a tiny proportion of the work that they do allocated to them for Sanctuary. I'm hoping to increase that, but they are essentially working as volunteers in a lot of the things that they do as well. And I'd like to say a massive thank you to them for everything that they do, and particularly to Pascal for this week of organising these events, which is it's incredible to bring all of these things together. So always good to finish on a positive. So hopefully some people have been inspired to go out and seek opportunities of how they can volunteer and support Sanctuary seekers. Okay, thanks everyone.